The pin was silver, sharp, glinting under the weak glow of a street lamp in the industrial park. It pierced through matted fur and skin, holding a blood-stained note to the body of a German shepherd who lay trembling inside a soggy cardboard box. The handwriting was hurried, panicked. The words were cryptic, but they would unravel everything. His name is Ghost. He knows where the bodies are. Look inside his skin. Inside the box, the massive dog lay motionless except for the shallow rise and fall of his scarred chest. His eyes were dark amber, clouded with exhaustion and something else, something that looked like warning. Fresh surgical wounds marked his flank. His breathing was labored. He had been left here for someone specific, someone who would understand. Some notes are just words. But this one carried the encrypted proof of corporate murder, the last act of a disappeared whistleblower, and a dog who had been turned into a living weapon against his will. This is a story about the secrets we bury, about the courage it takes to stop running, and about how sometimes the most dangerous truths are carried by the most innocent survivors. Before we continue, please leave a like, subscribe, and let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. Seattle, Washington, had always been gray in November. The rain came in sheets, relentless and cold, turning the streets into mirrors that reflected the city's steel and glass towers. Downtown, the tech campuses glowed with the warm light of innovation, and the smell of artisan coffee drifted from every corner cafe. Professionals filled the sidewalks, talking, networking, living. But there were darker corners of this city, places where the corporate glow did not reach. The industrial park near the port was one of them, a forgotten stretch of cracked pavement and rusting warehouses, where shipping containers sat like metal coffins, and the only sound was the distant horn of ferries crossing the Sound. This November, an early winter storm had turned the park into a maze of shadows and rain-slicked concrete. Most people stayed away. The cold was penetrating, the kind that seeped through your coat and made you want to stay inside where it was safe. Natalie Clark did not stay inside. Every evening after the freelance editing work dried up and the silence of her studio apartment became unbearable, the 34-year-old woman walked through the industrial park. She was not there for exercise or fresh air. She was there because it was the one place in Seattle where no one asked questions, where she could disappear into the anonymity of forgotten spaces. 2 years ago, Natalie had been an investigative journalist. She had been chasing a story about pharmaceutical fraud, one hand on her keyboard, the other clutching evidence that would expose a billion-dollar cover-up. She had been thinking about bylines, about justice, about the Pulitzer that surely waited on the other side of publication. Then her source disappeared. Marcus Reeves, brilliant, paranoid, brave, had walked into a meeting with federal investigators and never walked out. The official story was voluntary protective custody. Natalie knew better. Marcus had told her too much, trusted her with too much, and she had failed to protect him. The story died with his disappearance. Natalie's career followed 3 months later when she published what she could without Marcus's testimony. The lawsuit from Helix Pharmaceuticals was swift and devastating. Her editor abandoned her. Her sources went silent. The industry blacklisted her as reckless, conspiracy-minded, dangerous to work with. Marcus's body was never found. The truth was never told. And Natalie learned that some words kill. She returned to freelance work 6 months later and told no one the full truth. Her old colleagues knew she had been involved in a legal battle. They did not know what she had lost, or who. She preferred it that way. Sympathy felt like accusation. Now Natalie lived alone, in a 400-square-foot studio in Belltown. Marcus's encrypted files remained unopened on her hard drive. His last voicemail stayed saved in her phone. And every night she wore the same weathered press badge on a lanyard around her neck, a talisman from a life she no longer had the courage to live. She blamed herself. The lawyer said Marcus made his own choices. Everyone said so. But guilt does not listen to logic. Part of Natalie wanted to heal. Part of her believed she did not deserve to. November 18th came with driving rain. Natalie left her apartment at 6:45, same as always. The building's lobby was empty. Most residents were inside, warm, safe, watching television or making dinner. She nodded to the night security guard and stepped out into the storm. Outside, the cold hit her immediately. The temperature had dropped throughout the day, and now the rain fell in torrents, flooding the gutters and turning the sidewalks into shallow streams. Most people hurried toward their cars or ducked into the bright safety of restaurants and bars. Natalie pulled her hood up and walked in the opposite direction, toward the industrial park. The park was abandoned. The usual late-shift workers and security patrols had retreated indoors, driven away by the weather. The street lamps cast weak pools of yellow light onto the black pavement, and the warehouses loomed like dark monuments to the city's forgotten economy. Natalie's boots splashed through puddles as she made her way along the familiar path between Container Row and the old loading docks. She was almost past the abandoned freight office when she heard it. A sound, low, pained. Something between a whimper and a growl, coming from the loading bay ahead. Natalie stopped. Her heart quickened. She knew she should keep walking, should mind her own business, should not investigate strange sounds in an empty industrial park at night. The last time she had followed her instincts toward danger, a man had disappeared, and her life had collapsed. But something in that sound caught her, a note of suffering that felt too deliberate to ignore, too specific to be random. She moved toward the loading bays slowly, carefully. The rain was heavier here, cascading off the corrugated metal roof in sheets. Her hand instinctively went to the small canister of pepper spray in her coat pocket. That's when she saw it, a cardboard box, sagging under the weight of water, sitting directly beneath the broken security light. And inside the box, barely visible in the shadows, the dark shape of something large and alive. Natalie approached slowly, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. The rain hammered against her hood, drowning out everything except the thundering of her own pulse. 10 feet away she could make out details. The box was industrial-sized, the kind used for bulk shipping, and it was disintegrating under the downpour. The shape inside was definitely an animal, large, motionless except for shallow breathing. 5 feet away she saw the dog, a German shepherd, massive, even while lying down. His body curled into the smallest shape possible. His fur was matted with rain and something darker, mud or blood, she could not tell. His eyes were open, watching her with an intensity that made her freeze mid-step. There was no aggression in that gaze, only exhaustion and a terrible, ancient wariness. Then she saw the note. It was pinned directly to the dog's shoulder, the paper already dissolving in the rain, the ink bleeding into illegible smears. But it was the pin that made Natalie's stomach drop. A silver office pin, the kind she used to use for sourcing documents, driven through the paper and into the animal's flesh. The dog had not moved to dislodge it. He simply endured. Natalie's hands shook as she knelt beside the box, heedless of the puddle soaking through her jeans. Up close, she could see the note more clearly. The handwriting was frantic, shaky, written by someone whose hands were unsteady from fear or injury, or both. Most of the words had bled away, but she could still read the essential message. His name is Ghost. He knows where the bodies are. Look inside his skin. The world tilted. Natalie recognized that handwriting. She had seen it on dozens of post-it notes, stuck to smuggled documents, on napkins covered with contact information, on the margins of pharmaceutical reports, marked for her eyes only. Marcus Reeves had written this note. Marcus, who had been gone for 2 years. Marcus, who she had assumed was dead or disappeared into witness protection so deep he might as well be. Marcus had left her a message, in blood, pinned to a dog's body. "Oh God," Natalie whispered. Her vision blurred, though whether from rain or tears she could not say. "What did he do to you?" The dog, Ghost, watched her with those dark amber eyes, waiting. The pin glinted in the streetlight, and Natalie could see a thin line of blood trailing from where it punctured his skin. Fresh blood, which meant he had not been here long, which meant whoever had left him might still be close. Every instinct screamed at her to run. This was how it started last time. A cry for help, a trail of evidence, a truth too dangerous to know. She had followed that path before, and it had destroyed everything. She had sworn never again. But Ghost made a sound then, a soft whine that cut through the rain and the fear and the 2 years of self-imposed exile. It was the sound of something that had been hurt too many times and was still, impossibly, asking for help. Natalie reached out with trembling fingers and carefully, gently, began to remove the silver pin from Ghost's body. The pin came free with a soft resistance, and Ghost flinched but did not pull away. Natalie folded the disintegrating note carefully and tucked it inside her coat pocket, then stripped off her scarf to press against the small puncture wound. The dog allowed it, watching her with an intelligence that felt almost human. She should call animal control. She should walk away. She should do anything except what she was about to do. Instead, Natalie remembered another rainy night 2 years ago, when everything had fallen apart. It had been October then, the kind of Seattle evening where the rain turned to mist and the city felt like it was dissolving at the edges. Natalie had been sitting in her car outside a downtown hotel, waiting for Marcus Reeves to emerge from his meeting with federal investigators. She could still see the glow of her laptop screen in the darkness, still feel the electric thrill of knowing they were so close to breaking the story wide open. Helix Pharmaceuticals had been running illegal drug trials in South America, falsifying safety data, and bribing FDA officials to fast-track approvals. 63 people had died from medications that should never have reached the market. Marcus had the proof: internal memos, financial records, video testimony from whistleblowers in 3 countries. He had risked everything to gather it, and Natalie had promised him they would bring the entire corrupt system down together. The meeting was supposed to take an hour. After 90 minutes, Natalie had called Marcus's phone. No answer. After 2 hours, she had gone inside. The conference room was empty. The federal agents claimed Marcus had never shown up. Hotel security footage showed him entering the building but never leaving. He had simply vanished, as if he had never existed at all. Natalie had tried everything. She filed missing persons reports that went nowhere. She contacted every law enforcement agency she could find. She published what she had without Marcus's testimony, hoping publicity would force someone to act. Instead, Helix's lawyers had buried her under a defamation suit, so crushing it took everything she owned to settle. Her editor had cut ties immediately. Other journalists had stopped returning her calls. The message was clear. Some stories were too dangerous to tell, and some people were too powerful to expose. Marcus's disappearance had been ruled voluntary. The official theory was that he had gotten cold feet and fled. Natalie knew better. She knew what happened to people who threatened billion-dollar empires. She knew Marcus would never have abandoned their work willingly. She also knew it was her fault. She had pushed him to go to the federal investigators. She had convinced him it would be safe, that the system would protect him if he came forward. She had been wrong, and Marcus had paid the price for her naivete. For 2 years, she had carried that guilt like a stone in her chest. She had stopped investigating, stopped asking questions, stopped believing her words could change anything except get people killed. But now Marcus had sent her a message from beyond whatever darkness had swallowed him. He had trusted her one more time, even after she had failed him so catastrophically. Ghost whined softly, bringing Natalie back to the present. The rain was soaking them both. She needed to make a decision. Natalie made her choice the way she always had, with her heart instead of her head. Consequences be damned. She could not carry Ghost. He was easily 90 pounds, maybe more, and she was not strong enough. But she could coax him to follow. She stood slowly, keeping her movements deliberate and non-threatening, and backed away from the box. Ghost watched her, unmoving. For a long moment, she thought he would stay there, too broken or too afraid to trust another human being. Then he stood. It was not graceful. His legs shook with the effort, and he had to brace himself against the side of the box to keep from collapsing. But he stood, and when Natalie took another step backward, he followed. One careful step, then another, his body low and defensive, but moving nonetheless. "That's it," Natalie whispered. "Come on, boy. You're okay. You're going to be okay." It took 20 minutes to walk the 8 blocks to her apartment. Ghost moved like every step caused him pain, and twice Natalie thought he would simply lie down on the sidewalk and refuse to go further. But each time she stopped and waited, speaking softly to him, and each time he found the strength to continue. The rain never let up. By the time they reached her building, they were both soaked through and shivering. The night security guard looked up from his phone as they entered, his eyes widening. "Miss Clark, you can't bring a emergency," Natalie said, not slowing down. "I'll have him out by morning." She did not wait for a response. Ghost followed her into the elevator, and when the doors closed, he finally allowed himself to collapse. He lay on the floor, panting, his body trembling. Natalie knelt beside him and placed her hand gently on his head. He did not pull away. Inside her apartment, Natalie worked quickly. She had basic first aid supplies, gauze, antiseptic, medical tape, nothing sophisticated, but enough. She filled a bowl with warm water and grabbed the clean towels from her bathroom. Ghost had positioned himself in the corner by the door, watching her with those unreadable amber eyes. "I need to clean your wounds," Natalie said, approaching slowly with the supplies. "This is going to hurt." "I'm sorry." She expected him to growl, to snap, to show some sign of the aggression the note had implied. Instead, Ghost simply watched as she knelt beside him. When she pressed the warm, damp towel against the puncture wound from the pin, he flinched, but made no move to stop her. Natalie worked in silence, cleaning the wound, applying antiseptic, covering it with gauze. As she worked, she discovered more injuries. Old scars crisscrossed his body, some from fights, others clearly surgical. His fur was matted with dried blood that was not all his own. Whatever Ghost had been through, it had been sustained and brutal. The surgical scar on his flank was the most concerning. It was recent, maybe a week old, and it ran 6 inches along his ribs. The stitches were professional, but the incision was inflamed. Natalie pressed gently around the wound and felt something hard beneath the skin. Not bone. Something foreign. "Look inside his skin." Ghost turned his head and, for the first time, licked Natalie's hand. It was a small gesture, barely noticeable, but it carried the weight of surrender. He was choosing to trust her, even though trust had clearly betrayed him before. Natalie felt tears on her cheeks and did not wipe them away. Natalie waited until Ghost had fallen asleep before she allowed herself to truly examine the surgical scar. The dog lay on a pile of blankets she had arranged in the corner, his breathing finally steady and deep. Exhaustion had claimed him completely, and for the first time since she had found him, he looked almost peaceful. She sat cross-legged beside him, her laptop balanced on her knees, and carefully palpated the area around the incision. The hard object beneath his skin was unmistakable now. Rectangular, roughly the size of a USB drive, embedded in the muscle tissue along his ribs. The placement was deliberate, professional. Someone with surgical training had put it there. Marcus had done this. Marcus, who had been paranoid about digital security, who had encrypted everything twice and never trusted cloud storage. Marcus, who had disappeared with all his evidence and left Natalie with nothing but questions and guilt. He had turned his dog into a living safety deposit box. Natalie pulled out her phone and searched for veterinary clinics that offered microchip scanning. Most pets had RFID chips for identification, small and simple. But this object was larger, more complex. She needed to know what she was dealing with before she made any decisions about extraction. Her search was interrupted by a notification. An email from an address she did not recognize. No subject line. Her finger hovered over the delete button, but something made her open it instead. The message was brief. You have something that belongs to us. Return it unharmed and walk away. This is your only warning. No signature. No details. But the implication was clear. Someone knew she had Ghost, and they wanted him back. Natalie's hands shook as she closed the laptop. She moved to the window and looked down at the street 4 stories below. A black SUV sat parked across from her building, engine running, exhaust visible in the cold air. It had not been there when they arrived. They had found her already. Somehow, they had tracked Ghost to her apartment in less than 3 hours. She thought about the note's warning. He knows where the bodies are. Not metaphorical bodies, real ones. Evidence of real crimes, buried somewhere in the data stored inside this dog's body. Evidence powerful enough that someone was willing to hunt Ghost through the streets of Seattle in a rainstorm. Evidence that Marcus had died protecting. Natalie returned to where Ghost slept and placed her hand gently on his side, feeling the foreign object beneath his skin, feeling the rise and fall of his breathing. He had been weaponized without his consent, turned into a courier for secrets he could not understand. Just like Natalie had been used 2 years ago, fed information, pointed at targets, and then abandoned when the consequences became real. She understood now why Marcus had sent Ghost to her specifically. Not because she was brave or capable, or had any idea how to handle this situation, but because she was the only person Marcus had ever fully trusted, and trust was a currency more valuable than courage. The dog shifted in his sleep, and his paw twitched as if he were running. Natalie wondered what he was dreaming about. Freedom, maybe. Or the person who had loved him, before turning him into a weapon. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown sender. We know you're home, Natalie Clark. Last chance. She looked at Ghost, then at her phone, then at the door. Every rational part of her brain screamed to give him up, to open the door and hand him over, and go back to her quiet, guilt-ridden, safe existence. Instead, she began searching for veterinary surgical tools available for emergency home delivery. Natalie did not sleep that night. She sat in the darkness of her apartment with the lights off, watching the black SUV through a gap in the curtains. Ghost slept fitfully beside her, occasionally whimpering in his dreams. Every time a car passed on the street below, her heart rate spiked. Every creak of the building settling felt like footsteps in the hallway. The SUV never moved. Its engine idled continuously, a patient predator waiting for its prey to make a mistake. At 3 a.m., Natalie's phone buzzed with a third message. Time's up. She watched as the driver's side door opened. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing dark clothing that made him nearly invisible in the rain. He did not look up at her building. He did not need to. He crossed the street with the casual confidence of someone who knew exactly where he was going and what he would find when he got there. Natalie's breath caught. She had perhaps 2 minutes before he reached her door, maybe less if he had a way to bypass the building's security. She looked at Ghost, still sleeping, still trusting her to keep him safe. The surgical extraction tools she had ordered would not arrive until morning. She had no weapon, no plan, no experience with the kind of people who hunted in the dark. She had only one advantage. They did not know that she knew they were coming. Moving quickly and quietly, Natalie gathered essentials into her backpack. Laptop, phone charger, the disintegrating note from Ghost's body sealed in a plastic bag, what little cash she kept in the apartment. She pulled on dry clothes and her warmest jacket. Then she knelt beside Ghost and gently shook him awake. His eyes opened immediately, alert despite his exhaustion. He knew something was wrong before she said a word. We have to go, Natalie whispered. Right now. Can you walk? Ghost stood, stiff and clearly in pain, but standing. Natalie clipped a makeshift leash to his collar, an old belt, the only thing she had, and moved to her apartment door. She pressed her ear against it, listening. The hallway was silent, but she could hear the faint ding of the elevator arriving on her floor. They were out of time. Natalie had lived in this building for 18 months and had never once used the fire escape. Now she led Ghost to her bedroom window, forcing it open against years of paint and rust. Cold air and rain poured in. The metal grating of the fire escape was slick and treacherous, barely visible in the darkness. Ghost hesitated at the window's edge, looking down at the 4-story drop to the alley below. "I know," Natalie said. "I'm scared too, but we don't have a choice." She climbed out first, testing the strength of the ancient metal, then coaxed Ghost to follow. He struggled through the window, his injured body barely fitting, but he made it. They began their descent, metal stairs clanging softly under their combined weight. Behind them, from inside her apartment, Natalie heard the sound of her front door being kicked open. No knock, no warning, just the splintering of wood, and the heavy footfalls of someone who had come to take what they wanted by force. Ghost pressed against her leg, and together they descended into the rain-soaked darkness, leaving everything Natalie owned behind, except the secret buried in the dog's skin. They spent the next 2 days moving between cheap motels on the outskirts of Seattle, never staying more than 6 hours in one place. Natalie paid cash for everything and kept her phone powered off, except for brief moments to check for messages. The black SUV did not reappear, but she felt watched nonetheless, as if the city itself had eyes. On the third morning, in a dingy room off Highway 99 that smelled of cigarette smoke and desperation, Natalie finally worked up the courage to do what needed to be done. She had purchased veterinary supplies from 3 different stores, paying cash, never buying enough at once to raise suspicion. Local anesthetic, surgical blades, antiseptic, sutures, everything she needed to extract the device from Ghost's body. The dog lay on the bed, sedated but conscious, watching her with those amber eyes that held too much understanding. His trust was absolute and terrifying. "I'm sorry," Natalie whispered as she made the first incision, following the line of the existing scar. "I'm so sorry." Ghost did not flinch. The anesthetic held. Natalie worked with trembling hands, her journalism degree offering nothing useful for this moment except the ability to stay focused under pressure. She widened the incision carefully, exposing the muscle tissue beneath, and there it was, a small titanium capsule, slightly larger than a standard USB drive, embedded exactly where she had felt it. She extracted it gently, placed it in a steel dish, and sutured Ghost's wound with shaking fingers. The dog licked her hand once when she finished, then closed his eyes and slept. Natalie cleaned the capsule and examined it under the motel's harsh fluorescent light. Military-grade waterproofing. Encrypted. A small port on one end suggested it could be connected to a computer, but she would need specialized equipment to access it safely, without triggering any security protocols. She did not have specialized equipment. She had a laptop, and desperation. It took 4 hours to bypass the encryption. When she finally accessed the drive's contents, she found hundreds of files. Financial records, emails, photographs, video depositions. Everything Marcus had gathered about Helix Pharmaceuticals and more. Evidence of bribes to senators, falsified clinical trials in 6 countries, and a mass grave in rural Ecuador where 63 bodies had been buried after an experimental drug trial went catastrophically wrong. But it was the video file labeled "For Natalie" that made her hand stop shaking. She clicked it open. Marcus appeared on screen, thinner than she remembered, his face drawn with exhaustion and fear. The timestamp showed the video was recorded 3 days before his disappearance. Behind him, Ghost lay on a couch, younger, healthy, unaware of what was coming. "Nat, if you're watching this, it means I'm gone, and you found Ghost." Marcus's voice cracked. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for putting this on you after everything. But you're the only person I trust to finish what we started." He paused, running his hand through his hair the way he always did when anxious. "They're going to kill me. I know that now. The federal meeting is a trap. I can feel it, but I have to go anyway because if I run, they'll hunt me forever. This way, maybe they'll think the evidence died with me." On screen, Marcus looked directly at the camera. "Ghost has everything. I had a veterinary surgeon I trust. Implant the drive. If something happens to me, he'll find his way to you. I trained him to. He knows your scent, your address, your routine. He's smarter than any dog I've ever known, Nat. He'll wait as long as it takes." Tears blurred Natalie's vision. Marcus continued. "The files on this drive can bring down Helix and everyone they've corrupted. But more than that, they can save lives. There are drugs in development right now that will kill people, and this evidence can stop them. Please, Nat. I know I failed you. I know I disappeared and left you to face everything alone. But finish the story. For the 63 people buried in Ecuador. For everyone who'll die if we don't stop this." The video ended. Marcus's face froze on screen, forever trapped in that moment 3 days before he vanished. Natalie looked at Ghost, sleeping peacefully, despite everything that had been done to him. Marcus had not just given her evidence. He had given her a mission, a purpose, and a companion who had waited 2 years to fulfill his master's final command. She would not fail him again. Natalie stared at her phone for 20 minutes before she finally unlocked it. The contact was still there, saved under a name that made her chest tighten. Sarah Chen, do not call. Sarah had been her editor at the Seattle Tribune, the person who had believed in Natalie's work until belief became too expensive. When Helix's lawyers had descended, Sarah had made the calculation every editor makes: protect the institution, or protect the reporter. She had chosen the Tribune. Natalie had not spoken to her since. But Sarah had also been the one who sent Natalie a single text message 3 months after the lawsuit settled. I'm sorry. If you ever need help, I'm here. Natalie had never responded. She had made a vow to herself that day. No more journalism, no more allies, no more trusting that the system would protect those who told the truth. She would disappear, stay quiet, and never again risk someone else's life for a story. Now, looking at Ghost sleeping on the motel bed, his freshly sutured wound covered with clean gauze, she realized her vow had been a lie she told herself to justify her cowardice. Marcus had not stopped fighting. He had known they would kill him, and he had fought anyway, turning his own dog into a weapon against a people who thought they were untouchable. Natalie could not finish this alone. The evidence was damning, but she needed someone who could amplify it, someone with the platform and the credibility to make sure Helix could not bury it a second time. She needed Sarah. Her hands shook as she typed the message. It's Natalie. I have the Helix story. All of it. Everything Marcus died to protect. But I need your help to publish it safely. She hit send before she could change her mind. The response came 30 seconds later. Jesus Christ, Natalie. Where are you? Natalie hesitated. Giving her location meant trusting Sarah completely, and trust was what had gotten Marcus killed. But she had watched Marcus's video 6 times now, had memorized every word, every pause, every moment of fear in his eyes. He had trusted her with his last breath. She owed it to him to trust someone else. Motel off Highway 99, Room 14. I'm not alone. I have Marcus's dog. He's injured. If you're coming, bring medical supplies. And Sarah, come alone, please. 3 dots appeared immediately, indicating Sarah was typing. They disappeared, appeared again, disappeared. Finally, I'm on my way. 1 hour. Natalie, are you safe? The question made Natalie laugh, a bitter sound that woke Ghost. The dog lifted his head, alert despite the pain medication, and watched her with those knowing eyes. No, Natalie typed back. But I'm done hiding. She powered off her phone immediately after sending the message. If Helix had the capability to track her, and they almost certainly did, she had just given them a 1-hour window to find her. It was a calculated risk, the kind Marcus would have taken. Ghost stood carefully and moved to sit beside her, his body warm against her leg. He knew something was coming. Natalie wondered if Marcus had trained him for this too, if somewhere in his canine understanding was the knowledge that their fight was entering its final phase. She'll help us, Natalie told him, as much to convince herself as to reassure the dog. Sarah's good. She made a mistake before, but she's good. Ghost leaned his head against her knee, and Natalie realized she was crying again. Not from fear this time, but from the strange relief of no longer being alone. She had broken her vow, betrayed her own rules of survival, and instead of feeling vulnerable, she felt something she had not experienced in 2 years. She felt like a journalist again. Outside, rain continued to fall on Seattle, washing the city clean or drowning it. Natalie could no longer tell the difference. She sat with Ghost and waited for Sarah to arrive, waited for whatever came next, waited to finally finish the story that had cost Marcus everything. The waiting, she knew, was almost over. Sarah arrived in 47 minutes, not the promised hour. She pulled up in a silver sedan, alone as requested, carrying a canvas bag that Natalie hoped contained medical supplies, and not a recording device for Helix's legal team. Trust was a muscle Natalie had not exercised in 2 years, and it ached with the effort. The reunion was brief and tense. Sarah looked older, lines etched around her eyes that had not been there before. She embraced Natalie quickly, then knelt beside Ghost, examining his wound with surprising competence. My sister's a vet, Sarah explained, answering Natalie's unspoken question. I know enough to tell you this dog needs proper medical attention soon, or infection will kill him. They spent 30 minutes reviewing the files on Marcus's drive. Sarah's face grew paler with each document, each video deposition, each photograph of the mass grave in Ecuador. When she finally looked up, her eyes were wet. This is bigger than Helix, she whispered. This goes into the FDA, into Congress. Natalie, if we publish this, When we publish this, Natalie corrected. Sarah nodded slowly. When we publish this, they'll come after us with everything they have. Legal, illegal, everything in between. You understand that? Before Natalie could respond, Ghost's head snapped toward the window. His body went rigid, a low growl building in his chest. Natalie had learned to trust that sound. We need to leave, she said, already moving. Now. They were halfway to Sarah's car when the black SUV rounded the corner, followed by two others. The vehicles moved with practiced coordination, boxing them in against the motel's back wall. Doors opened simultaneously, and 4 men emerged, all wearing the casual business attire of corporate security contractors. The lead man was the same one Natalie had seen outside her apartment. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the efficiency of someone accustomed to violence. He smiled, and it was worse than any threat. Miss Clark, Miss Chen, we'd like to have a conversation about property that doesn't belong to you. Sarah stepped forward, journalist instincts overriding survival instincts. We're calling the police. No, the man said pleasantly. You're not. He moved toward them, and Ghost exploded. The dog launched himself between Natalie and the approaching threat, with a speed that seemed impossible for an animal with fresh surgical wounds. His teeth found the man's arm, clamping down with the full force of 90 pounds of trained protection. The man screamed and fell backward. Chaos erupted. The other 3 men rushed forward. Sarah grabbed Natalie's arm, pulling her toward a gap between the buildings. Ghost released his first target and turned to face the others, positioning himself as a barrier between the threat and the women he had chosen to protect. Ghost, come! Natalie screamed, but the dog held his ground, buying them precious seconds with his body. They ran. Behind them, Natalie heard shouting, heard Ghost's savage growls, heard the sound of something heavy hitting metal. Every instinct demanded she turn back, but Sarah's grip was iron, dragging her forward through the rain-soaked alley toward the docks beyond. They burst onto the waterfront, breathing hard, and Sarah pulled Natalie behind a stack of shipping containers. The rain hammered down, covering the sound of their gasps. Natalie's heart thundered against her ribs, and all she could think was that she had abandoned Ghost, had left him to fight her battle alone. Then she heard it, the click of claws on wet pavement, growing closer. Ghost emerged from the darkness, limping badly, blood on his muzzle that was not his own. He had followed them through the maze of Seattle's industrial waterfront, had refused to be left behind. He collapsed at Natalie's feet, and she dropped beside him, her hands finding the warmth of his body, checking for new wounds. His eyes met hers, and in them she saw Marcus's determination, Marcus's refusal to surrender, Marcus's final gift to the woman he had trusted with everything. We finish this, Natalie said to Sarah, to Ghost, to the rain and the darkness. We finish this tonight. Sarah made the call from a burner phone, while Natalie held pressure on Ghost's reopened wound. They were hiding in a maintenance shed near the waterfront, the sound of rain on the metal roof drowning out everything except their ragged breathing. 3 names, Sarah said. 3 journalists at 3 different publications, all receiving the files simultaneously. The New York Times, the Washington Post, the Guardian. Too many targets for Helix to silence at once. It's uploading now, Sarah said, watching the progress bar on her laptop. Encrypted transfer. 20 minutes, and it's done. 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. Ghost lay between them, his breathing shallow but steady, his amber eyes watching the door. He had fought for them, bled for them, carried Marcus's truth in his body for 2 years, waiting for this moment. Natalie stroked his head gently, whispering promises she intended to keep. When the upload completed, Sarah closed her laptop with a finality that echoed in the small space. It's out there now. Whatever happens, they can't bury it again. They emerged from the shed into a Seattle dawn, washed clean by rain. The black SUVs were gone, either called off or searching elsewhere. Natalie did not care which. She and Ghost walked slowly through streets that felt different now, lighter somehow, as if the weight of 2 years had evaporated with the sharing of truth. Sarah drove them to her sister's veterinary clinic, where Ghost received the proper medical care he should have had from the beginning. The vet worked in focused silence, cleaning and resuturing his wounds, administering antibiotics, checking for internal damage. When she finished, she looked at Natalie with questions in her eyes but did not ask them. He'll heal, the vet said simply. He's strong. Stronger than he should be after everything. The story broke 6 hours later, simultaneous publications across 3 continents. The headlines were devastating. Pharmaceutical giant Helix linked to mass deaths in illegal drug trials. FDA officials allegedly bribed in safety cover-up. Mass grave in Ecuador connected to U.S. corporation. By evening, federal investigators had raided Helix's Seattle headquarters. By midnight, 3 executives had been arrested. By morning, the pharmaceutical company's stock had plummeted 47%, and calls for congressional hearings echoed through Washington. Marcus's name appeared in every article, credited as the whistleblower whose courage had exposed the conspiracy. Natalie's name appeared too, as the journalist who had finished his work. She read the stories on her phone, sitting in the clinic's recovery room beside Ghost, and finally allowed herself to cry, not from grief this time, but from the strange catharsis of completion. Ghost rested his head on her lap, and Natalie realized they had both been freed. No more running. No more hiding. No more carrying secrets that could kill them. They had walked through darkness and emerged into light, scarred but alive, Marcus's legacy finally honored. Outside the window, Seattle continued its endless rain, but for the first time in 2 years, Natalie saw it as cleansing rather than drowning. She had told the truth. Marcus's sacrifice had not been in vain, and the dog who had carried evidence in his skin now carried only the promise of a peaceful future. The pin that had held the note to Ghost's body sat on the table beside them, a silver reminder of how their journey had begun. Natalie picked it up and placed it in her pocket, not as a weapon, but as a memorial to the courage it took to stop hiding and start fighting back. If you enjoyed this story of courage, truth, and the unbreakable bond between a journalist and the dog who saved her, please subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories. Hit that like button, and let me know in the comments what you thought of Natalie and Ghost's journey. Your support helps us bring these powerful stories to light.